Alice Ann Munro is a Canadian author writing in English. Munro's work has been described as having revolutionized the architecture of short stories, especially in its tendency to move forward and backward in time. Her stories have been said to embed more than announce, reveal more than parade. Munro's fiction is most often set in her native Huron County in southwestern Ontario. Her stories explore human complexities in an uncomplicated prose style. Munro's writing has established her as one of our greatest contemporary writers of fiction, or, as Cynthia Ozick put it, our Chekhov. Munro is the recipient of many literary accolades, including the 2013 Nobel Prize in Literature for her work as master of the contemporary short story, and the 2009 Man Booker International Prize for her lifetime body of work. She is also a three-time winner of Canada's Governor-General's Award for Fiction and was the recipient of the Writers' Trust of Canada's 1996 Marian Engel Award, as well as the 2004 Rogers Writers' Trust Fiction Prize for Runaway. Life and work. Early life. Munro was born Alice Ann Laidlaw in Wingham, Ontario. Her father, Robert Eric Laidlaw, was a fox and mink farmer, and her mother, Anne Clark Laidlaw, was a schoolteacher. Munro began writing as a teenager, publishing her first story, The Dimensions of a Shadow, in 1950 while studying English and journalism at the University of Western Ontario under a two-year scholarship. During this period she worked as a waitress, a tobacco picker, and a library clerk. In 1951, she left the university, where she had been majoring in English since 1949, to marry fellow student James Munro. They moved to Dunderave, West Vancouver, for James's job in a department store. In 1963, the couple moved to Victoria, where they opened Munro's Books, which still operates. Career. Munro's highly acclaimed first collection of stories, Dance of the Happy Shades, won the Governor-General's Award, Canada's highest literary prize. That success was followed by Lives of Girls and Women, a collection of interlinked stories. In 1978, Munro's collection of interlinked stories Who Do You Think You Are? Was published. This book earned Munro a second Governor-General's Literary Award. From 1979 to 1982, she toured Australia, China and Scandinavia for public appearances and readings. In 1980 Munro held a position of writer-in-residence at both the University of British Columbia and the University of Queensland. In 2006, Munro's story The Bear Came Over the Mountain was adapted for the screen and directed by Sarah Pollier's Away From Her, starring Julie Christie and Gordon Pinsent. Since the 1980s, Munro has published a short story collection at least once every 4 years, most recently in 2001, 2004, 2006, 2009, and 2012. First versions of Munro's stories have appeared in journals such as The New Yorker, The Atlantic Monthly, Grand Street, Harper's Magazine, Mademoiselle, and the Paris Review. Her collections have been translated into 13 languages. On October 10, 2013, Munro was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature, cited as a master of the contemporary short story. She is the first Canadian and the 13th woman to receive the Nobel Prize in Literature. Munro is noted for her long-time association with editor and publisher Douglas Gibson. When Gibson left Macmillan of Canada in 1986 to launch his own Douglas Gibson Books imprint at McClellan and Stewart, Munro returned the advance that Macmillan had already paid her for The Progress of Love so that she could follow Gibson to the new company. Munro and Gibson have retained their professional association ever since. When Gibson published his own memoirs in 2011, Munro wrote the introduction, and to this day Gibson often makes public appearances on Munro's behalf when her health prevents her from appearing personally. Almost 20 of Munro's works have been made available for free on the web. However, in most cases these are the first versions only. From the period before 2003, 16 stories have been included in Munro's own compilations more than twice, with 2 of her works scoring even 4 republications, Carried Away, and Hateship, Friendship, Courtship, Loveship, Marriage. Writing. Many of Munro's stories are set in Huron County, Ontario. Her strong regional focus is one of the features of her fiction. another is the omniscient narrator who serves to make sense of the world. Many compare Munro's small-town settings to writers from the rural South of the United States. As in the works of William Faulkner and Flannery O'Connor, her characters often confront deep-rooted customs and traditions, but the reaction of Munro's characters is generally less intense than their Southern counterparts. Her male characters tend to capture the essence of the everyman, while her female characters are more complex. Much of Munro's work exemplifies the literary genre known as Southern Ontario Gothic. Munro's work is often compared with the great short story writers. In her stories, as in Chekhov's, plot is secondary and little happens. As with Chekhov, Garen Holcomb notes, all is based on the epiphanic moment, the sudden enlightenment, the concise, subtle, revelatory detail. Munro's work deals with love and work, and the failings of both. She shares Chekhov's obsession with time and our much-lamented inability to delay or prevent its relentless movement forward. Munro's short novels have also been compared to those of the Sardinian poet and writer Grazier de Leda, also a Nobel Prize winner. A frequent theme of her work, particularly evident in her early stories, has been the dilemmas of a girl coming of age and coming to terms with her family in the small town she grew up in. In recent works such as Hateship, Friendship, Courtship, Loveship, Marriage and Runaway, she has shifted her focus to the travails of middle age, of women alone, and of the elderly. It is a mark of her style for characters to experience a revelation that sheds light on, and gives meaning to, an event. Munro's prose reveals the ambiguities of life, ironic and serious at the same time, mottos of godliness and honor and flaming bigotry, special, useless knowledge, tones of shrill and happy outrage, the bad taste, the heartlessness, the joy of it. Her style places the fantastic next to the ordinary, with each undercutting the other in ways that simply and effortlessly evoke life. As Robert Thacker has it, Munro's writing creates an empathetic union among readers, critics most apparent among them. We are drawn to her writing by its verisimilitude, not of mimesis, so-called, and realism, but rather the feeling of being itself. Of just being a human being. Many critics have asserted that Munro's stories often have the emotional and literary depth of novels. Some have asked whether Munro actually writes short stories or novels. Alex Keegan, writing in Eclectica, gave a simple answer: who cares? In most Munro stories there is as much as in many novels. Research on Munro's work has been undertaken since the early 1970s, with the first PhD thesis published in 1972. The first book-length volume collecting the papers presented at the University of Waterloo First Conference on her oeuvre was published in 1984, The Art of Alice Munro, Saying the Unsayable. Indiana, 2003/2004, The Journal Open Letter. Canadian Quarterly Review of Writing and Sources published 14 contributions on Munro's work. In autumn 2010, the Journal of the Short Story in English Les Cahiers de la Nouvelle dedicated a special issue to Munro, and in May 2012 an issue of the journal Narrative focused on a single story by Munro, Passion, with an introduction, a summary of the story, and 5 essays of analysis. Creating new versions, Alice Munro publishes variant versions of her stories, and sometimes within a short span of time. Among the latter, her work Save the Reaper and Passion came out in 2 different versions in the same year, in 1998 and 2004 respectively. At the other end of the scale, 2 stories were republished in a variant version about 30 years later, Home and Wood. Anne Close and Lisa DiColorano reported in 2006 that Munro had not wanted to reread The Galleys of Runaway, no, because he unregistered trademark LL rewrite the stories in their symposium contribution in appreciation of Alice Munro. They say that of her story Pause. For example, Munro did 8 versions in all. Arno writes that Wood is a good example of how Munro, being a tireless self-editor, rewrites and revises a story, in this case returning to it for a second publication nearly 30 years later. In this case, Arno says, Munro revised characterizations, themes and perspectives, as well as rhythmic syllables, a conjunction or a punctuation mark. The characters changed too. inferring from the perspective they take on things, they are middle-aged in 1980, and in 2009 they are older. Alno perceives a heightened lyricism brought about not least by the poetic precision of the revision undertaken by the author. The 2009 version is made up of 8 sections instead of 3 in 1980, and it has a new ending. Arno writes that Munro literally refinishes the first take on the story, with an ambiguity that is characteristic of Munro unregistered trademark S endings, and that the author reimagines her stories throughout her work a variety of ways. Several stories were republished with considerable variation as to which content goes into which section. This can be seen, for example, in Home, The Progress of Love, What Do You Want to Know For? The Children Stay, Save the Reaper, The Bear Came Over the Mountain, Passion, The View from Castle Rock, When Lock Edge, and Deep Holes. Personal life, Munro married James Munro in 1951. Their daughters Sheila, Catherine, and Jenny were born in 1953, 1955, and 1957 respectively. Catherine died 15 hours after birth. In 1963, the Munros moved to Victoria where they opened Munro's Books, a popular bookstore still in business. In 1966, their daughter Andrea was born. Alice and James Munro divorced in 1972. Munro returned to Ontario to become writer-in-residence at the University of Western Ontario, and in 1976 received an honorary LL.D. from the institution. In 1976, she married Gerald Freemlin, a cartographer and geographer she met in her university days. The couple moved to a farm outside Clinton, Ontario, and later to a house in Clinton, where Freemlin died on April 17, 2013, aged 88. Munro and Freemlin also owned a home in Comox, British Columbia. At a Toronto appearance in October 2009, Munro indicated that she had received treatment for cancer and for a heart condition requiring coronary artery bypass surgery. In 2002, her daughter Sheila Munro published a childhood memoir, Lives of Mothers and Daughters, Growing Up with Alice Munro. Works. Original short story collections, Dance of the Happy Shades Euro 1968, Lives of Girls and Women Euro 1971, Something I've Been Meaning to Tell You Euro 1974, Who Do You Think You Are? Euro 1978, The Moons of Jupiter Euro 1982, The Progress of Love Euro 1986, Friend of My Youth Euro 1990, Open Secrets Euro 1994, The Love of a Good Woman Euro 1998, Hateship, Friendship, Courtship, Loveship, Marriage Euro 2001, Runaway Euro 2004 ISBN 1-4000-4281-X, The View from Castle Rock Euro 2006, Too Much Happiness Euro 2009, Dear Life Euro 2012, Short Story. Compilations, Selected Stories Euro 1996, No Love Lost Euro 2003, Vintage Munro Euro 2004, Alice Munro's Best, a selection of stories Euro Toronto 2006/Carried Away, a selection of stories Euro New York, 2006. Both with an introduction by Margaret Atwood, New Selected Stories Euro 2011, Lying Under the Apple Tree. New Selected Stories, 434 pages, 15 stories, see Alice Munro 2011, Vintage, London 2014, ISBN 978-0-0995-9377-5, Selected Awards and Honours, Awards, Governor-General's Literary Award for English Language Fiction, Canadian Booksellers Award for Lives of Girls and Women, shortlisted for the annual Booker Prize for Fiction for The Beggar Maid, the Writers' Trust of Canada's Marian Engel Award for her body of work, Rogers Writers' Trust Fiction Prize for Runaway, Trillium Book Award for Friend of My Youth, The Love of a Good Woman and Dear Life, W. H. Smith Literary Award for Open Secrets, Lenan Literary Award for Fiction, Penn Malamud Award for Excellence in Short Fiction, National Book Critics Circle Award for The Love of a Good Woman, Gillert Prize, Re-Award for the short story given to a living American or Canadian author. Lear Award O. Henry Award for Continuing Achievement in Short Fiction in the U.S. for Passion, What Do You Want to Know For? And Corrie, Man Booker International Prize, Canada-Australia Literary Prize, Commonwealth Writers' Prize Regional Award for Canada and the Caribbean. Nobel Prize in Literature as a Master of the Contemporary Short Story. Honours, 1992, Foreign Honorary Member of the American Academy of Arts and Letters, 1993, Royal Society of Canada's Lorne Pierce Medal, 2005, Medal of Honor for Literature from the U.S. National Arts Club, 2010, Knight of the Order of Arts and Letters, 2014, silver coin released by the Royal Canadian Mint in honor of Munro's Nobel Prize win, notes and references. Further reading. External links, works by or about Alice Munro in libraries, Alice Munro at the Internet Movie Database, Alice Munro collected news and commentary at The Guardian, Alice Munro, The Art of Fiction No. 137, The Paris Review No. 131, Summer 1994, Alice Munro at the Canadian Encyclopedia, Alice Munro at the British Council Writers' Directory, Stories by Alice Munro accessible online, Alice Munro's papers held at the University of Calgary, Literally Speaking with Alice Munro. TV Ontario April 5. Retrieved September 22, 2010 A.